The Rockbridge Weekly is delighted to host Commonwealth Attorney candidate Josh Elrod. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you, Jared.
Josh has announced on March 14th that he plans to run for the position of Commonwealth Attorney in the election of November 8th to face off against Bucky Joyce, the current Commonwealth Attorney. And Josh dropped by to have a little conversation about his candidacy. Josh, give us a little bit of background. Who is Josh Elrod anyway?
Well, Josh Elrod was born in Iowa, wasn't born in Virginia or Lexington, and moved here, 1984, when my dad came to be the dean of the college at Washington and Lee. And when I left, I'd had those sort of formative early years in Iowa and thought that I would want to go back, that was the best place in the world. I mean, I grew up in a lovely town, Ames, Iowa, which is where my dad was working at Iowa State University. And sort of thought of myself as a Midwesterner and had this connection with Iowa. But I've lived here, except for a couple of years, being away at school and a couple of years when I lived in California. I've lived here since 1984, and now I just don't think of any other place as home. I have a family here, my wife, Fran, and we have 3 kids, Sierra, who's at the high school, John and Adam, who are both at Waddell, and pretty involved in the community. Like a lot of people, just love the mix here of being a small town, but with a lot of really interesting, diverse people, and just a great part of the country. Like to garden a little bit. I used to like to golf. I have not gotten to do that in a while. I think that's having 3 kids and a job. And
maybe you can give us some tomato growing tips here later.
Well, plant them, wait until last couple of weeks in May. I've made that mistake before. Yeah, but that's it. I'm busy. Family, work, some things in the community, and that pretty much is all my time. Like everybody else, I'm just as busy as can be.
Well, like many candidates, I'm sure you have new ideas, some kind of a platform that you plan to present to the citizenry. Give us an overview of some of those. Right.
Well, I've thought about this a lot coming into the campaign, that people are going to ask, and already have asked, why are you running? And I think it's going to be important for me to get out and tell people why this position is important and why it makes a difference who they elect. So being an attorney, I've practiced here for 10 years, and I've done, not full-time, but I've done criminal defense work that entire time. And that obviously gives me a lot of interaction with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I also certainly talk to a lot of other people about their experiences. And my feeling is there are improvements in the way that office can be run. Now, why is that important? Maybe this goes without saying, but that job, Commonwealth Attorney, is responsible for prosecuting criminal offenses in Lexington and Rockbridge County. And you're deciding whether people who break the law are going to be, well, you're not deciding, but you're working toward whether they're going to be convicted of crimes, whether they're going to go to jail, whether certain charges are going to be brought against them. So it's important, and it has a big impact.
Definitely.
I know if you go to any kind of polls about public opinion and what are concerns, and probably for time immemorial, public safety and crime are going to be things that concern people. So obviously it's an important position. What I think I've seen, and especially in the last few years, is that my feeling is that this office is not, doesn't show quite enough, for my taste, initiative about handling cases, not on top of the cases in the way that I think they ought to be. And Mr. Joyce has actually made a few objective policy decisions that I think have actually contributed to that problem. And I don't want to get too technical for the viewer, so I'll try to make this succinct, but there's a process called discovery in criminal cases, and discovery is something that's set out by the law. There's certain information the prosecution has to give the defense, certain information the defense has to give the prosecution. And the rules of the Supreme Court of Virginia actually call for that to be in written form. And it had been pretty standard practice for as long as I can remember practicing here, for that to be the case. Mr. Joyce has recently made a decision that he wanted to move away from that. And I think I can only speculate as to his motives for that, but my guess is, what I feel like is he felt like it was a burden on their office to put this information together. Well, one of the things I've always found in practicing, and in civil cases where there's also discovery, is you hate to do it. And when you have to go and tell your client, you know, we've got to answer all these questions that the other side has, it always does seem like a burden. But nothing helps you prepare your case better than getting down and answering those tough questions. And it exposes the difficulties in your case, problems you may have, and it gets you prepared. And so that, you know, that to me is exactly the wrong position to take. And I think that, unfortunately, that kind of approach shows up. I think that it can be done better. I think these cases can be, I heard somebody talking this morning about it was talking about the budget crisis and whether, you know, I don't remember if it was Congress or the president or whoever, but are they driving the issue or is the issue driving them? And I kind of feel like right now the cases are driving the Commonwealth's attorney. I think they ought to be driving the cases.
That's an interesting perspective. You're kind of breaking the mold in another regard by not having a party affiliation. Many local candidates for various positions like this, in Rockbridge County history anyway, have run with a party affiliation. Why did you decide not to do that this time around?
Well, I have to say, I'll confess a little ignorance on my part. I knew my mother had run for mayor and did not run with party affiliation. She's been associated with the Democratic Party, and I have as well, and that's not something I'm trying to get away from. But I knew when she ran, and we talked about it, that, you know, there was this idea that certain local offices, you don't run traditionally on a party affiliation. And I think that's been true with the mayor and maybe treasurer and some others. But I could be wrong about this. Somehow, I knew that when Bucky Joyce and David Natkin had run, I guess it's been 8 years ago, that they had run with party affiliation. But I somehow had it in my mind that was unusual and that traditionally people didn't run. And so that was part of it. The other part of it, though, and maybe the more substantive thing is, I really don't think that it's a political office. I understand why people run with parties. They get organizational support. You know, there's help with the vote and reaching people. And maybe there are some issues that you identify yourself with. But this is not a legislative position. It doesn't seem to me that you would really connect it with a lot of policy positions. And I guess the last thing is, right now, you know, I'm not somebody who's gotten completely sick and tired of politics, but it is a time when the divisions seem to define the parties more than anything else. And I just did not feel it was necessarily helpful to identify myself with a party running for this office. I didn't think it had to do a lot to do with why I thought people should elect me. So,
if I were a citizen and you were visiting my house out on the campaign trail, and I said to you, Josh, give me a couple good reasons to elect you specifically, what would you tell that citizen?
I would say that I care about my work. I care about the law. I grew up, and when I think back on it now, it seems so clear to me, a little bit maybe obsessed with fairness, with what kind of rules made sense, and probably sometimes really frustrated my parents, you know, discussing with them what I thought were fair rules for myself or between myself and my brother or whatever it was. But, you know, if I was out on the playground or, you know, watching sports, that was just what really interested me. And every day when I get up and go to work, I am excited about dealing with the law, and I am excited about what I do and trying to make the law work better, more effectively for my clients. But at the same time, I would say I am not a no holds barred kind of attorney. I think that the law is designed to be fair to people. The law is designed to work well for everybody who interacts with that. And that's sort of embodied in a lot of the ethical codes that we're supposed to take with us as we approach law. And, I think that as part of my background is going to ensure that when I go in, I'm going to go in and work at this job with a lot of energy and with what I think is the right approach. I care so much for this county, for this city, for the people in it, and I really think that I can do a lot to continue to make this a great place to live.
Thanks very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to have been here.